Well, as Russia surges forward in Ukraine, there is no stopping Israel either, as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu makes it very clear that his war won't end until he completely destroys Hamas. Now, three top military leaders here in the U.S. spoke to the Washington Post about what they see as Israel's failure to learn from the past, specifically the mistakes the U.S. made in Iraq. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Dr. John Nagl is one of those quoted in the op-ed. He says that Israel's Gaza strategy against the terrorist organization Hamas is just simply not working. John joins me from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where he now teaches at the Army War College. John, good to see you. You know, President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, Secretary of Defense Austin, just to name a few of the heavy hitters, have told Netanyahu to not only back off from the bombing, but don't invade Rafah. From your experience, does Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition allies, even his senior IDF officers, even respect our U.S. military advice?
Well, to be fair to them, our track record in fighting insurgencies isn't all that it might be. But in this case, we're really hoping they will learn from the mistakes the United States made, the mistakes that I saw when I was fighting in that war early in Iraq. And we're afraid that Israel is making a bunch of the same mistakes that we made. We'd really like them to learn from our mistakes.
You literally wrote the textbook for counterinsurgency. You say that Israel needs to learn from our mistakes, particularly in Iraq. We all know that the U.S. went in there to take down Saddam, to wipe out terrorism. You were there. I was there at the same time. It all blew up in our face. You can't just come into a country and clear out the bad guys and then take off. You have to clear, hold, build. That's something that you teach, and I witnessed you do it. Do you think Israel is, what do you think specifically that Israel is doing wrong here?
So Israel is making the same mistake that we made early in the Iraq War. They're clearing and leaving. And I did my doctoral work on the Vietnam War, and we made the same mistake there. And it's just heartbreaking to read the reports of American soldiers in Vietnam clearing a sector, and then 6 months later having to clear it again because after they departed, the insurgents moved back in. We saw that again in Iraq. You saw it happening there, and now the Israelis are seeing it happen, and the Israeli generals are complaining to their government that they are clearing a sector and then months later being sent back to clear it again. So if the only purpose of a war is to build a better peace. And to build a better peace when you're fighting terrorists, you can't just chase them out of a neighborhood. You've got to stay there to keep them from moving back in. You've got to protect the population. And then you've got to build some of the resources that will get the people to, over the long term, support the government instead of the insurgency. It took us years to relearn that lesson in Iraq.
So how do you wipe out Hamas for good? Could the Palestinians ever have their own security force? Because that's exactly what the U.S. tried to do in Iraq, build up Iraqi forces so they could protect themselves, and we failed miserably at that. How do you go into a place like Gaza, the West Bank, and create a Palestinian security force?
So Gaza and the West Bank are two different places. I wouldn't recommend trying to build it in Gaza right now. But I do think that the Israelis are very late in working to build a Palestinian security force. Ultimately, in any counterinsurgency campaign, you don't want to keep your own troops there forever. You want local forces to take over. That's what we ultimately did in Iraq. We trained Iraqi security forces who are now tenuously holding control of that country. In Afghanistan, we got involved in that effort too late, and the Afghan security forces couldn't hold without American advisors. In the short term, we need a two-state solution so that Arab countries, so that Jordan, so that Egypt, probably with Saudi funding, will provide Arab security forces to police Gaza after Hamas has been defeated there. And then over the long term, Israel has to build its own security forces out of the Palestinians who will provide long-term security for that area so that the Israelis don't have to do it indefinitely.
Dr. John Nagl, always great to talk to you. Appreciate the op-ed. Appreciate you joining us. Hope we can talk again, John. Thank you.
I'd like that. Thank you.